Ma'am, we don't need tech support right now, the young pilot trainee said, with barely concealed irritation, not even looking up from his flight manual. Sarah Martinez, 52, adjusted her maintenance coveralls and stepped back from the Apache simulator. "Just here to check the systems," she replied quietly. What none of those cocky trainees knew was that the tech support lady had more combat flight hours than their entire class combined. Welcome to True Story Zone. Before we dive into this powerful story of respect, skill, and hidden excellence, tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button. Sarah Martinez wakes up every morning at 5:45 a.m. in her small apartment near Fort Rucker, Alabama. At 52, she's been working as a flight simulator technician for 3 years. Her job is simple: maintain the Apache helicopter simulators and stay invisible. To the young pilot trainees, she's just part of the furniture. They see a middle-aged woman in blue coveralls with S. Martinez technical support embroidered on the chest, gray hair in a ponytail, safety glasses, tool belt. She doesn't talk much, just does her job and disappears. What they don't see is the folded flag on her bedroom dresser, or the shadow box containing medals, Distinguished Flying Cross, Bronze Star, Air Medal with 15 oak leaf clusters, or the faded photograph of 8 pilots in desert camouflage standing in front of Apache helicopters in Afghanistan, 2008. Fort Rucker trains young warrant officers on the Apache, the most advanced attack helicopter in the world. The current class is typical: 8 young men, ages 22 to 28, all convinced they're God's gift to military aviation. Leading the pack is Warrant Officer Jake Morrison, 26, from Texas. Former college athlete, natural leader, the kind of guy who's never met a challenge he couldn't dominate. "Apache's just a bigger version of what we've been flying," Morrison tells his classmates. "More firepower, better avionics, but still just stick and rudder." Warrant Officer Mike Chen, 24, nods in agreement. "These simulators make it even easier. Computer does half the thinking." The only woman in the class is Chief Warrant Officer Lisa Torres, 27. She's had to work twice as hard to earn half the respect, often excluded from the boys' club around Morrison. That's the dynamic when Sarah enters the simulator bay Tuesday morning, tool bag in hand. "Ma'am, we don't need tech support right now," Morrison says without looking up. He's studying weapon systems with 3 other trainees spread across a table covered with technical manuals and tablet computers. Sarah pauses near the simulator entrance, her tool bag heavy in her hand. "Just running diagnostics on the hydraulic feedback system. Won't interfere with your training." Morrison glances up for the first time, taking in her worn coveralls and the tool belt around her waist. His expression shows mild irritation at the interruption. "How long will that take? We've got serious training to do here. Advanced tactical scenarios." 20 minutes, maybe less, Sarah replies evenly, maintaining professional courtesy despite the dismissive tone. Chen chimes in with a smirk loud enough for the others to hear. "Make sure you don't break anything important. Some of us are actually trying to become pilots here, not just fix things." Light laughter ripples through the group. A few of the other trainees look up from their manuals, grinning at Chen's comment. Sarah nods politely and moves toward her workstation, accustomed to being treated as invisible support staff. As she works, she overhears their conversation about the urban combat scenario that's been defeating trainees. "Rodriguez crashed again yesterday," Morrison says. "3rd time this week." "That scenario's brutal," Chen agrees. "Multiple targets, hostile fire from all directions." "It's all about compartmentalization," Morrison continues confidently. "Keep your head cool, trust your training." Torres looks up. "Easy to say when you're not getting shot at for real." Morrison waves dismissively. "Simulation, reality, same principles apply. You either have what it takes or you don't." Sarah's hands pause on her equipment. She's heard this conversation 1,000 times from young pilots. All confidence, no experience. As she packs up, Morrison calls out, "Thanks for not breaking anything, ma'am." Sarah stops. "Good luck with your training," she says quietly, and leaves. 3 days later, Morrison faces the urban combat scenario that has become the bane of every trainee's existence. The scenario? Kandahar Province, Afghanistan, 2010. Multiple insurgent positions dug into civilian buildings, friendly forces pinned down and taking casualties, civilian structures providing cover for enemy fighters, degraded communications due to mountainous terrain, and a ticking clock as wounded soldiers wait for evacuation. Morrison straps into the simulator with his characteristic confidence, adjusting his helmet and checking his instrument displays. The other trainees gather around the observation windows, expecting to watch their star performer finally conquer the scenario that had been humbling everyone else. The mission briefing scrolls across his display. Provide close air support to pin down infantry, neutralize enemy positions in buildings 2 and 7, minimize civilian casualties, extract wounded personnel when area is secure. But as soon as Morrison's virtual Apache enters the combat zone, reality hits like a sledgehammer. Simulated enemy fire erupts from multiple positions, rooftops, windows, concealed fighting positions. His threat warning system screams constantly, a cacophony of alerts that makes concentration nearly impossible. Radio calls flood his headset from ground troops, controllers, medical personnel, and other aircraft, creating an overwhelming wall of urgent voices, all demanding his immediate attention. Morrison tries to engage the first target building, lining up his Hellfire missiles, but his shot misses by 50 meters, striking an empty courtyard and sending up a plume of dust and debris. He overcorrects his approach angle, pulling too hard on the cyclic, and nearly collides with a simulated minaret. His heart rate spikes as the scenario begins to overwhelm his ability to process information and make decisions. "Focus, Morrison!" calls Instructor Park from the control booth, his voice cutting through the radio chatter. "Prioritize your targets. You've got wounded men down there." But Morrison is already falling behind the timeline. Every decision takes too long. Every maneuver is hesitant, imprecise. The simulated enemy fire is relentless, and his threat warning system continues its electronic screaming. After 12 agonizing minutes, he's accomplished none of his mission objectives and has crashed his aircraft twice due to pilot error. "Reset the scenario," Morrison says, pulling off his helmet and wiping sweat from his forehead. His usual confidence has evaporated, replaced by frustration and confusion. Second attempt yields the same devastating result. Morrison manages to stay airborne longer, but his gunnery remains erratic, his navigation confused, and his communication with ground forces breaks down completely under pressure. Third attempt proves even worse. Morrison crashes his virtual Apache within 6 minutes, overwhelmed by the complexity and intensity of the simulated combat environment. "That's enough for today," Instructor Park announces, his voice carrying a mixture of disappointment and concern. Morrison climbs out of the simulator, his flight suit damp with perspiration, his confidence shattered for the first time since arriving at Fort Rucker. The other trainees attempt to offer encouraging words, but everyone can see he's genuinely rattled by the experience. "That scenario's impossible," Morrison mutters, shaking his head as he stares at the now dark simulator screens. "No one could fly effectively in those conditions. There are too many variables, too much happening at once." Over the next week, every trainee attempts the scenario. Every single one fails. Chen crashes on his first attempt. "The scenario's broken," he declares. "Too many variables." Torres lasts longer, but still fails. "This is beyond trainee level." The class petitions Instructor Park to replace the scenario. "This scenario is not broken," Park tells them during briefing. "It's based on actual missions flown by actual pilots in actual combat." Morrison raises his hand. "But sir, those were pilots with years of experience." "Some of them," Park agrees. "But some had no more flight time than you do right now." Chen speaks up. "Maybe the simulators aren't calibrated correctly. The tech support people might not understand combat requirements." Murmurs of agreement from the class. "Would you like to discuss it with our senior technical support specialist?" Park asks. Morrison shrugs. Sure, maybe she can explain why the simulators are so unrealistic. Park picks up his phone. Ms. Martinez, could you join us? The trainees have questions about simulator calibration. 10 minutes later, Sarah enters the briefing room. 12 pairs of eyes turn toward her. 8 trainees, 3 instructors, and the coordinator. The trainees believe the Kandahar scenario may not be properly calibrated, Park explains. Sarah looks around the room. What specific parameters seem incorrect? Morrison leans forward. The threat environment is too dense. Enemy fire from too many directions. Communication load beyond what any pilot could handle. Target identification requirements are unrealistic, Chen adds. Too many variables changing too quickly. Sarah listens without interrupting. Those are valid observations. Let me ask, how many of you have studied the actual mission reports these scenarios are based on? Blank stares. Every parameter you've mentioned is taken directly from after-action reports filed by pilots who successfully completed similar missions. Morrison's confidence returns. Those were experienced combat pilots, not trainees. What do you consider experienced? Sarah asks. Thousands of flight hours, multiple deployments, years of combat experience. Sarah nods. How many flight hours do you have, Warrant Officer Morrison? 423 total, 115 in Apache trainers. She goes around the room, getting similar numbers from each trainee. The pilot who flew the actual mission your scenario is based on had 408 flight hours when she completed it, 63 in Apaches. The room goes quiet. She? Torres asks. Chief Warrant Officer 3 Lisa Hendricks, 162nd Attack Battalion, 24 years old, her 7th combat sortie. Morrison shakes his head. Impossible. No one with that little experience could handle what we're failing. Sarah looks at him steadily. Would you like me to demonstrate the scenario? Nervous laughter. Ma'am, Chen says, these are advanced combat simulations. I understand, but you're questioning systems I maintain. If there's a technical problem, I should identify it. Park looks intrigued. Ms. Martinez, you're qualified to operate the simulators. I have the necessary certifications. Morrison can't hide his skepticism. When's the last time you actually flew anything? It's been a while, Sarah says simply. The trainees exchange glances. This should be entertaining. Let's see what tech support can do. Morrison grins. 15 minutes later, Sarah sits in the Apache simulator, her hands resting on controls she hasn't touched in an official capacity for 3 years. She's changed from her maintenance coveralls into a spare flight suit, borrowed from the equipment room, but she still looks completely out of place to the young trainees watching from the observation windows. Word of the unusual demonstration has spread quickly through the training facility. Several off-duty instructors have abandoned their lunch breaks to crowd around the observation windows, curious to see what the maintenance technician thinks she can accomplish where trained pilots have failed repeatedly. Sarah methodically adjusts the seat position, checks the control responsiveness, and runs through pre-flight procedures with the systematic precision of someone who has performed these actions thousands of times. Her movements are deliberate, practiced, economical. No wasted motion, no hesitation, each action flowing naturally into the next. Ready when you are, Ms. Martinez, Instructor Park says over the intercom, his tone carefully neutral, but tinged with skepticism. The scenario begins exactly as it had for Morrison and the others. Sarah's simulated Apache lifts off from the forward operating base, the digital landscape of Afghanistan spreading out below her virtual aircraft. But immediately, even to the untrained eyes of the watching trainees, something is fundamentally different about her approach. Her flight path isn't the direct, aggressive route that all the trainees had instinctively chosen. Instead, she follows a more circuitous approach that uses the mountainous terrain to mask her helicopter's radar signature, keeping low behind ridgelines and using valleys to avoid early detection by enemy forces. Her navigation is precise, economical, and utterly professional. The work of someone who understands that combat flying is as much about not being seen as it is about engaging targets. As she approaches the target area where friendly forces are pinned down, she begins making radio calls that sound nothing like the hesitant, uncertain communications the trainees had been using. Her voice is crisp, clear, and authoritative, cutting through the chaos of battlefield communications with the confidence of someone who has done this in real life when actual lives hung in the balance. Ghost 6-1, inbound to target area, requesting updated enemy positions and friendly locations. 6-1, be advised we have multiple hostile positions in buildings 2 and 7. Repeat, buildings 2 and 7. Friendlies are marked with IR strobes in the courtyard between those structures. Copy, buildings 2 and 7. I have visual on your strobes. Setting up for north to south attack run, danger close. In the observation room, Morrison watches with growing amazement and confusion. Sarah's voice over the radio sounds exactly like a real combat pilot. Professional, calm, completely in control of both her aircraft and the tactical situation unfolding around her. Her first attack run is absolutely textbook perfect. She identifies the target building, calculates the proper approach angle accounting for wind speed and elevation changes, selects the appropriate weapon system, and puts 2 Hellfire missiles precisely where they need to go with surgical accuracy. Direct hit on Building 2. Secondary explosions observed. Multiple enemy casualties confirmed. Moving to engage Building 7. The scenario continues to unfold in all its complexity. But Sarah is consistently staying ahead of every development, anticipating problems before they become critical, adapting to changing conditions with the fluid expertise of someone who has faced these challenges when the consequences were measured in human lives rather than training scores. The scenario continues, but Sarah stays ahead of every development. When new threats appear, she's already repositioning. When communications become garbled, she adapts. When ammunition runs low, she makes every shot count. Morrison realizes his mouth is hanging open. This is the same scenario that defeated him completely, but Sarah is making it look manageable. The scenario reaches its climax. Multiple enemy positions, friendly forces in danger, civilian structures nearby. The exact conditions that overwhelmed every trainee. Sarah's Apache moves through the threat environment like choreographed dance. Her fire is accurate, economical, devastating. Her communication clear and concise. Her situational awareness total. 22 minutes later, she completes all objectives with 0 friendly casualties and minimal collateral damage. Mission complete. Returning to base. The observation room is dead silent. How did you do that? Morrison finds his voice. Sarah removes the helmet and runs a hand through her gray hair. Practice. But you said you hadn't flown in a while, Torres says. I said it had been a while. I didn't say I'd forgotten how. Park steps forward. I think it's time these trainees learned about their technical support specialist. Sarah looks at him questioningly. Tell them about the 162nd Attack Battalion. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She hasn't heard that unit designation in years. What's the 162nd? Morrison asks. Park answers. Chief Warrant Officer 4 Sarah Martinez served 3 combat deployments with the 162nd. Afghanistan 2008 to 2014. Over 800 combat flight hours. The trainees stare at Sarah with new understanding. 800 combat hours? Torres whispers. The scenario you've been failing is based on an actual mission Chief Martinez flew in Kandahar Province March 15, 2011. Morrison's voice is barely audible. You flew that mission for real? Sarah nods once. The room falls silent as implications sink in. The maintenance lady they'd been dismissing is one of the most experienced combat pilots any of them will ever meet. Flying in combat isn't about technology, Sarah begins quietly, moving to the front of the room. It's not about computer systems or advanced avionics. Those are tools. Important tools, but just tools. She assumes the posture of an instructor. Combat flying is about decision-making under pressure, processing multiple information streams while people shoot at you, staying calm when everything is chaos. Morrison raises his hand. How do you develop that composure? Through experience, through making mistakes in situations where mistakes have consequences. You don't learn it from manuals. But in training, how do we prepare? Torres asks. By respecting the simulation. Every scenario represents something that happened to real pilots. When you dismiss it as impossible, you dismiss their experiences. Sarah pauses. The pilot who flew the mission your scenario is based on. Her maiden name was Hendricks. After marriage, Martinez. Another silence. You flew that mission, Morrison says. I flew that mission, and dozens like it. Not because I was special, but because I learned to respect the aircraft, the mission, and the people depending on me. Over the following weeks, Sarah begins spending more time in the simulator building, officially for technical issues, but actually advising struggling pilots. The trainees' attitudes transform completely. Morrison approaches Sarah with genuine respect. Chief Martinez, could you watch my simulation and give feedback? Sarah agrees, watching Morrison attempt the scenario. His performance has improved significantly. Your identification is good, but you're taking too long to commit. In combat, hesitation kills. How do I make faster decisions? Practice until it becomes automatic. Focus on reducing time between identification and weapon release. She works with each trainee individually. Chen's communication improves. Torres gains confidence in decision-making. 3 weeks after Sarah's demonstration, Morrison attempts the scenario again. This time, he takes time for reconnaissance. His communications are clear, his engagement systematic and efficient. 28 minutes later, he completes it successfully. Chief Martinez, I couldn't have done that without everything you taught me. Sarah smiles. You did the flying. I just helped you understand what you were supposed to be doing. Over the next days, each class member successfully completes the scenario that had been defeating them for weeks.
Word spreads through the instructor cadre.
Colonel Richardson, commanding officer of the training center, asks to speak with Sarah privately. Chief Martinez, why are you working maintenance instead of as an instructor pilot? Sarah tenses. Sir, I needed a job when I got out. The position was available. You're one of the most experienced Apache pilots we've ever had here. Why aren't you sharing that knowledge officially? Sarah looks down. Sir, I'm 52. I've been out of flying for 3 years. The Army doesn't typically hire civilian instructors who are middle-aged women working maintenance. Richardson leans back. Our pilot training program had a 35% failure rate on advanced scenarios. Since you began working with this class, that failure rate has dropped to 0. Sarah looks up surprised. 0, Chief. Every trainee has now completed scenarios that were defeating them for weeks. He opens a folder. Distinguished Flying Cross, Bronze Star with Combat 5, Air Medal with 15 clusters. Over 800 combat hours across 3 deployments. Sir, that was long ago. I watched your demonstration recording. That was 3 weeks ago, and it was some of the finest flying I've seen in 20 years. Richardson stands, walking to the window. I'm creating a new position. Senior Civilian Flight Instructor. Written specifically for your qualifications. You'll handle advanced scenarios, combat preparation, and mentoring challenging cases. Sir, I appreciate the offer, but Chief Martinez, we need you. These pilots need you. Your knowledge is too valuable to waste on maintenance. Will you accept? Sarah thinks about the past weeks, watching trainees transform from overconfident to competent. The satisfaction of seeing them succeed, knowing her knowledge helps prepare them for combat challenges. Yes, sir, I'll accept. 6 months later, Senior Civilian Flight Instructor Sarah Martinez has become a legend at Fort Rucker. Her advanced scenarios are feared by trainees and respected by instructors. Her pass rate approaches 100%. But more importantly, she's changed the training culture. Trainees arrive with less arrogance and more humility. They understand experience comes in many forms, and valuable lessons often come from unexpected sources. Morrison, now a qualified pilot preparing for deployment, stops by Sarah's office. "Chief Martinez, I wanted to thank you, not just for flying lessons, but for teaching me about respect, about not making assumptions based on appearances." Sarah looks up from training materials. "You learned the most important lesson. Stay humble, keep learning, and remember there's always someone who knows more than you do." Morrison grins. "Yes, ma'am, and if I meet them, I'll ask for help instead of dismissing them." As Morrison leaves, Sarah returns to work. On her desk sits the framed photograph, 8 pilots in desert camouflage in Afghanistan, 2008. Now it's not hidden. It's displayed prominently, a reminder of who she was, who she is, and who she's helping to train. Because sometimes the most valuable people are the ones you least expect. Sometimes the greatest teachers are those who've learned through fire and experience. And sometimes the maintenance lady in coveralls is exactly who you need to learn from. So I ask you, have you ever underestimated someone based on appearance? Dismissed someone's knowledge because of their job or gender or age? Share your story in the comments. Is exactly who you need to learn from. So I ask you, have you ever underestimated someone based on appearance? Dismissed someone's knowledge because of their job or gender or age? Share your story in the comments. If this moved you, subscribe to True Story Zone. We honor hidden heroes, overlooked experts, people who carry knowledge the world needs to hear. Because true excellence doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits quietly, in coveralls, carrying tools and dignity, until someone is wise enough to ask for help, instead of making assumptions. And when that moment comes, when respect is finally given where it's due, that's when real learning begins. That's when young pilots become aviators, trainees become professionals, and the next generation discovers their greatest teachers might be the people they walk past every day without noticing. The most important lesson isn't about flying helicopters. It's about flying through life, with enough humility to recognize wisdom wherever you find it.